Something really weird happened at the grand finals of the NA Pro AM qualifiers when the server crashed not once but twice on Junkertown in the map 3's multiple of the series. The Saints had capped with 220 on the board, but on Trick Room's attack at the end of B with a solid 3 minutes on the clock, the server just reset the game back to 0-0. So the admins threw it to like a 20-minute break, probably trying to figure out what was going on and what to do from there, and then decided, you know, we'll just run it back. 0-0, go again. And so the Saints playing their offense, they're going their way, they're fighting on third point, and this time they're like halfway through third with 120-ish left on the clock, and again, the server resets to 0-0. So then it's fucking like, what? And they go to a 30-minute break because what is going on? And they decide, you know what? We're just going to leave Junkertown. Just go away. We'll go to Rialto. So despite this over an hour of just nothing happening because the Junkertowns were just scrim maps, basically, this was probably the most hyped match that I've watched since last year's Grand Finals pretty easily. Map 1 did go to Trick Room with some very clutch gameplay and good Sombra adaptation to stop Mikey's ball. And honestly, Trick Room probably should have been dead to rights on Icebreaker, but when Tree went down to Infected's barrier in the barrage, Mikey and King just couldn't coordinate a kill, and Trick Room were able to claw their way back into a win there. Then Saints went on to pretty easily win on Blizzard World. They stopped Trick Room at the end of B, and then they completed where they needed to go with over 3 minutes, and Tree is just so good on the Sojourn. This map geography made it extremely difficult for Trick Room to secure any kills on him on the Wrecking Ball. He was just evading everything. No matter where he was going, he was fucking shit up. Now, back to this map 3, which was an hour of nothing, and then going to Rialto, False would come in. Saints would get all the way to C with really relative ease, resulting in Trick Room actually swapping off of the ball composition onto Rush, but it wasn't enough to make a real solid hold, and Saints ended up capping with just over 2 minutes. And this map kind of really highlighted to me how the Saints comp just kind of wins with the D.Va versus the ball, because no matter where Infected tries to Ghost to set up, there's something to mark him. There's a Tracer, there's a Sombra, there's a Discord Orb, there's a D.Va, and then whenever he does find an opportunity to swing in, it was on a very easy to predict path that CJ was just able to sleep him, and then everything would be stopped. The only real progress that Trick Room made on their offense was more so Tree maybe getting a bit over aggressive or going for something and then dying, and they had to give some space. That was really what it felt like to me. It's an extremely back and forth Esperanza. Neither team made any real distance path to the checkpoint. Just at the very end, teams barely got into the choke. And this was because Trick Room was playing a Tracer Rush and the Saints were playing just like the playoff Monkey Rush. Trick Room's composition with the Reinhardt really made it so that they weren't losing fights very quickly. Even whenever they were starting to lose a fight, they would find a way to, you know, back up, regroup, not lose too much progression on the payload on the bot, and they just kind of bunkered down. Sometimes, you know, you lose the fight, but then you burn a lot of time off the clock. Sometimes you win the fight, and even whenever they were behind, they were still drawing out these fights, and then whenever they got ahead at the very end, it was looking really good for them. Ults were coming up, and just in the overtime, Infected ended up dying right before Maypole got the beat drop on him by a few seconds. It's really tough. Because on one hand, with that beat drop, there's so much stuff you got to worry about. The mines were coming up, their own sound barrier was coming up, the Tree's overclock, and Tree's just the best in the lobby. So his overclock, you really do want your beat for that. But unfortunately, Infected wasn't able to survive long enough for the beat drop to come out, you know, later as they would have wanted. And they end up losing, and it was very close. So then Trick Room goes into Lijiang, and they actually whip out the Bastion Rhyme composition, which is something they've done throughout the tournament, but not in this series so far. And Mikey just got absolutely decimated on the Winston. Then he goes right to ball. But even though both rounds were extremely close, 99-99 duels, Trick Room ended up coming out on top on both of them with their Rush composition with a Sombra and a Cassidy in the end, because the Bastion's not going to work forever, right? But the Sombra cast was very good because you couldn't go ball into it, really. The Winston would get hacked and get blown up as well, and they ended up winning out. And then you get to the banger of all bangers on map 6, which is Junkertown, ironically. They return to the scene of the crime, but this time, because Trick Room have had two suboptimals, not like it was really poor, but it wasn't as good as Saints Junkertown maps. They were basically script maps, right? So they were able to make some adjustments, and Pummy comes out on the Widowmaker, and he completely controls this lobby. The amount of pressure he was exerting, even whenever he wasn't finding picks, was absolutely insanity. On the offense, King needs to consistently keep him in check. Once King died, it was lights out. Pummy was able to go wherever he wanted to get as many angles as he wanted while being unchecked. Trick Room were able to push into B. However, unfortunately for them, B is much less suitable for the Widowmaker, so he was forced to go over to the Sombra, and despite having ult advantage, some unfortunate trickles come through, some staggers if you will. and Trick Room only make it to the very end of B before getting stopped. And it's kind of like, well, that's probably not good enough to win. This is what it felt like. But going into this defense, Pummy again comes out on the Widowmaker, which he wasn't doing before in the paused maps that broke the lobby. Comes out on the Widowmaker, and he's just owning this lobby. He was doing so much. The D.Va can't dive that far back. It's like 2 to 3 boosters that you'd have to make to go all the way to him, and then he can just leave, and you're shooting the D.Va the whole time. It just doesn't work, right? And King can't do anything himself. Tree's on the Hanzo. He doesn't want to mirror the Widow, right? So what happens is eventually King and Tree end up going Sombra Tracer, but actually Pummy does a really smart thing, and he just kind of leaves the fight entirely. So if they want to go chase him, it's like a 4v3. Trick Room would win that, obviously. Very smart from him. However, in the overtime fight, the final fight, Tree and King eventually do end up killing him with the help of a Nano D.Va, and the mines on the point weren't enough to stop Saint's aggression. So they end up making it into B, Saints do, in overtime. And then this B point is just something else. There were so many different fights that just had a wild turnaround. It looked like Saints had it locked down twice, and then they didn't twice, and then eventually they do manage to secure it, but it was looking like a map 7 was going to happen, and this was an extremely close game. I'm really looking forward to see how these teams fare against actual Overwatch League teams, and for Trick Room specifically, I'm quite curious to see how the Ryan composition will fare, because in the league scrims so far, we've seen nothing despite it being very prevalent in these kind of contenders tournaments. Also, Meatball's the GOAT and Canada strong, so there's that. Let me know down below how you think the Ryan comp will do, and let me know if you can think of anything that's quite like a double server crash in the middle of a very high stakes game like this. I can't think of anything, so yeah, have yourself a good one. Deuces.